Okay, so we're continuing in this theme. I think this is now part 3 of the video of once saved, always saved. And what I've been doing is going through the scriptures to see the scriptures that in fact give us confidence that once we are genuine believers or genuine followers of Christ, that He will keep us, that He will sustain us, that He will seal us by His Holy Spirit, that He will sanctify us, that He has authored our faith and He has perfected it. And even though whilst we're going through the sanctification process, our status in heaven, is set, and He will keep us, and we are in His hand, and no one can snatch us, out of His hand. I'm doing that not only to provide a one-sided view of what the scriptures say, but we're also going to look at the scriptures that some of my friends, gave to me to say this is why they believe that once saved does not mean you're always going to be saved, and you have to persevere in one way or the other until you are saved on the final day. So I'd gone through all the verses that talk about in the past, currently, in the future, eternity past the current, and all sorts of different time periods that the verses that we can see in the New Testament scriptures also almost show us that whichever angle from which you look at it at, we are guaranteed our salvation because we have been sealed by the Holy Spirit. So then I went into, okay, if we have those scriptures, why then is this debate even happening? And I said I'm going to look into all the other scriptures, obviously, that seem to suggest that once you're saved does not necessarily mean you're always saved, or that you can lose your salvation. So now we've been talking about people who are not really saved, and we started off with a verse in 1 John that if they were of us, they would have remained with us, but because they went out, we know that they were not of us, to start with. And that if we are born of God, then we don't make a practice of sin, because God's seed now abides in us, and we cannot sin because we're now born of God. We also looked at Hebrews to say that if we have actually become partakers of Christ, then and hold that assurance to the end, then we will be we will be safe, and we will, as it says, have become partakers of Christ. But also to guard from any misunderstandings, this holding fast from the beginning to the end, as Philippians tells us, is a work of God that is happening within us. He is the one that is working, within us. And Ephesians tells us, that these works have been prepared beforehand, for us. So we'll continue with the people who are who might be deceived, who might not, who might think that they are saved, or who are not saved, or who are making pretenses, who will actually not make it on the on the day. So let's look at Luke chapter 16, 26 to 27, because we were just talking about the ones that were performing miracles and all sorts of things that Jesus says, I never knew you. But Luke 13 verse 26 to 27 says, "Then you will begin to say, we ate and drank in your presence, and you taught in our streets. And he will say, I tell you, I do not know where you are from. Depart from me, all you evildoers." Right? They'll say, well, they're saying to Jesus here, no, but we ate and drank in your presence. We were with you, and you taught, in our streets. But Jesus, point blank, would tell them that He doesn't know where they're from, and they should, depart from Him. So I think it's key for us to not readily associate just because people are around Jesus, just because people are around Christians, just because people are saying the right things, because people look like they're doing the right things, etc., does not mean that they're definitely genuine believers. We simply don't know. As I was saying again, it's an important point that we don't know who is genuine and who is not. It's only God who knows the hearts, of people, and we can, examine ourselves. So, proximity or association is not, the guarantee, that you'll be taken to the, to the end. It's something about what's happening inside, and for the true believers. John chapter 6 verse 69 to 71 says, it says, we have believed, right? This is the disciples talking to Jesus. We have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God. Jesus answered them, did I myself not choose you, the 12? And yet one of you is a devil, right? Now he meant Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for he, one of the 12, was going to betray him. So Jesus is saying here, listen, yes, I chose you. I chose the 12 of you. And, we've been together however long they were, maybe 3 years or whatever else, healing people together, feeding people, teaching, all sorts of things that were happening. But Jesus is saying, no, actually among you, the 12 of you that I specifically chose, one of you, is a devil. No. Now, I'm simply trying to, I suppose, give an illustration here about how these things can work, because when you look at Judas, he would have been around, he would have been sent out with the 72 or with the 12, and probably would have cast out demons and healed people and taught people and understood, and was hanging around and was associated with and was known to be of that group. But in effect, Jesus is saying, but one of you is a devil. One of you is actually not of us. So the more and more we kind of see, I'm beginning to build this picture now, and I suppose you can challenge me on that and look at the scriptures yourself and say, okay, is this actually true, or is that what the scriptures say? 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 1 to 2. So we're looking at more and more of these conditional things where actually the true believers are known by one way, and the ones that are not truly saved, are in pretense. So 1 Corinthians 15 verse 1 to 2 says, now I make known to you, brethren, the gospel which I preached to you. So he's saying to all of them, I preached the gospel to all of you, which you also received, in which you also stand, by which you are also saved. Okay, let's slow down there. So I make known to you, brethren, I'm making known to you the gospel which I preached to you, which you also received, and which you will also stand, right? By which you are also saved, if you hold fast the word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. So it is possible to believe in vain. Now, that doesn't mean you're saved. It simply means you looked like you believed, but you believed in vain. It was not to any consequence. So the people who will hold fast the word which was preached and which they believe is what they will stand in, and hold it to the very end, because they have not, as Paul says here, believed in vain. Let's look again. So it is possible to be deceived. It is possible to not actually be saved and think that you're saved. Let's look at Colossians chapter 1 verse 21 to 23 says, and although you were formerly alienated and hostile in mind, engaged in evil deeds, yet now he has reconciled you in his fleshly body through death, in order, this is why he's doing it, in order to present you before him holy and blameless and beyond reproach. But that's not where it stops. If indeed you continue in the faith, firmly established and steadfast, and not moved away from the hope of the gospel that you have heard, which was proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, was made a minister. So again, it keeps showing us here, the scriptures keep showing us here, that if indeed you continue in the faith, based on the working of Christ, I would argue, based on all the other verses that we are reading, then you are genuinely saved. John 15 verse 6, it says, if anyone does not abide, to abide means to stay in, to continuously stay in Jesus. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up, and they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burnt. So if someone does not abide, continue to abide, in Jesus, i.e. the mark of them being a true disciple, then they are thrown away as a branch, and that it dries up. The last verse we'll look as far as these people that are not really saved. We know that they are not really saved because they do not abide, because they do not continue, because they do not stay and endure, all the way to the end, by the empowering of the Spirit. So John 8 verse 31 to 32. So Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed him, right? So they had believed him, right? Whether that means to be true followers or not, that's a separate matter. So Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed in him, if you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. If you continue, then you are truly disciples of mine. So that means there are disciples that are not true disciples. It's not that they're definitely disciples, then they lose their salvation. No. It's to say that we know that they're true disciples because they continue, in the word. So it's not like, I was once a real good disciple or whatever, then I fell off. No. You're better off saying, I used to think I was a disciple, but because of my falling off, now I actually know that I was fake, after all. So the ones who had believed him, so he's speaking to all of them, what they call the visible church, everybody that they could see there, that the ones who were the invisible church, the true church, right, were the ones that would continue, in the word. Now, that takes us to some examples. So now we're going to take a look at some examples of these situations happening in real life, because some people say, well, Takwirira, you say that if you continue, or if someone abides in me, or if you continue, you're talking about all this continuing and holding fast and all sorts of things, but really, is that not just me who does the holding fast? Is it not me by my my efforts and striving that does that? I would say no. I know it might almost sound like it, but based on number one, all the verses that we read and some of these examples that I want to give can actually now start to make it even clearer that the person who is doing the working, like we saw in Ephesians, like we saw in Philippians, that it is Christ, it is God who is working inside you and doing these good deeds. Because the good deed of abiding in Christ, the good deed of continuing, the good deed of persevering is a deed that God gives it to you as a gift, that you just walk into it by his grace. It's not about you and how you're doing it that takes you there. So let's have a look at some examples where which further kind of make me believe this. So Luke chapter 22, this is Jesus. Luke chapter 22 verse 31 to 32 says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail, and you, once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat, but who? But God, Jesus, I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. So really, if Peter manages to make it through the situation, it's not because of him. It's not because of something that he's doing. No, it is because of the prayer that Jesus is making for his behalf. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. So we know that the verses which we'll come to that talk about Jesus who intercedes for us, right? If Jesus is praying for us on our behalf to the Father, as he is on the right hand side of God the Father now, praying that our faith may not fail, then surely that is where the power to not fail comes from. That is where the power to abide comes from. That is where the power to continue and persevere, that's where it comes from. It doesn't come from somewhere else within. No, it is Christ who is doing this work within us, because it is him who is doing it, and not somehow our kind of efforts and how good we are and how we keep striving and fighting or whatever. No, it is God himself, or Jesus Christ, who is praying on our behalf. All right, Mark 13 verse 22, just a different other example, which might explain a different point, I suppose. But it says, and then if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or behold, he is there, do not believe him, for false Christs and false prophets will arise, and they will show signs and wonders in order to lead astray, comma, if possible, the elect, right? So it's saying we're going to have all these false things happening, etc., etc., and whatever else, right? And they will lead a lot of people astray. And as we were talking about at the very beginning with that verse in Revelation about people that would worship the beasts that were not written in the book, it's saying, so the people that will be led astray here are not the elect. And you remember the election talk from Ephesians, from Romans, etc., the ones who are called and predestined. But it says they will show signs and wonders, okay, in order to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. To say that once you are elect, right, God will keep you, and whatever will happen, in the end times or whatever, in the current situation or whatever else, God will keep you, and you will not be totally, led astray. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 7, verse 25. Hebrews 7:25. This ties in perfectly with the verse about Peter that we just read. It says here, so Jesus, therefore Jesus is able to save forever, right? Therefore he is able also to save forever those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. Now that is a beautiful truth, that Jesus right now is busy, right, making intercession for us, praying for us that our faith may not fail, praying for us that we will persevere to the very end. That's what Jesus is doing for us right now as the high priest, in heaven. It says that he is able to save us forever, so that we may not be lost, so that we may not, be shipwrecked and all sorts of things, because he always lives to make intercession, for them. So we're looking at those examples that are showing us even more and more that God's power is upon us and within us and working within us to save us all the way. And Jesus is praying for us, praying for the genuine believers that they will stay faithful and they will persevere, to the very end. Now, whilst we're there, so we'll put that on the side. So I'm just throwing these things out, and I want you to just think about them and let me know, how does it land with you? As in, when I'm reading all these scriptures, and I hope you're reading them too and comparing and doing your own research, how is it, is it currently landing? So let's look at Matthew 22, verse 8 to 14. I think this will further, so these parables I think will further kind of give us understanding as far as the people that might think that they're saved, but in effect, they're not. And like I say, I don't know who they are, only God knows exactly who they are. But let's see how this actually plays itself out in certain parables, and how Jesus will have said to teach us things like that. So it says Matthew 22 verse 8 to 14. Then he said to his servants, the wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find. And those servants who went out into the roads and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there a man who had no wedding garment. And then he said to him, friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, bind him hand and foot and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. So the simple point that I really just get from this parable is there's a big wedding, a lot of people have been invited, everybody's filled up the hall, right? But even of those people who have been invited, people who think they are guests, in the kingdom, the Lord or the person who's invited all these people to will see someone who is there, or will see some people there, that really are not supposed to be there. People who think just because they are surrounded, with the guests and they're at the feast and they're in the right place or whatever, but in fact, will be taken out, because many, it says, are called, but few, are chosen. So for the ones that are truly chosen, on that day, on that final day, they will not be found wanting. Let's have a look at another parable. Matthew chapter 13, verse 24 to 30. It says this. he put another parable before them, saying, so Jesus was speaking all these parables about the kingdom, and I think we can learn some truths, of how the kingdom kind of works, based on some of the parables that Jesus was sharing. So he put another parable to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed seeds among the wheat and went away, or sowed weeds among the wheat. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds? He said to them, an enemy has done this. So the servants say to him, then do you want us to go and gather them? But he said, no, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. So again, there is this concept, I think anyway, of the visible church and the invisible church. So the visible church, are all, the entire garden or this entire field with all this stuff, the greenery that has been planted in there. But the true ones, because they've been allowed to grow together, we are in the world together with unbelievers, with believers, with people who are deceived, with all sorts of characters. However, at the end, we will then know who the true believers were, who the true wheat was, and who the weeds was. So at the moment, it's all growing together. And like I'm saying, it's kind of hard to really pinpoint who is who. No, that one is right, that one is not. We don't know how to do that, and I need to make that very clear over and over again, that we don't know who it is that is genuine and who it is that that isn't. But we will know at the very end, because God Himself will then tell the reapers to separate the wheat, from the tares. Let's see if we can, we can squeeze one more in there. So Matthew 25 verse 1 to 13. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the other ones came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." So another parable, I suppose, that tells us again that these 10 virgins were together. They were in the same place. They were waiting for the same person, the same groom. But some of them were ready, and some of them were were not ready. So again, the ones that are ready, the true disciples, the ones that are ready, when the bridegroom comes, they will be ready. They would have been living ready. But these other ones, although they were there, really, were not living expectantly. They were not ready, for the coming of the groom. So all again to just say that I think we can make a strong case for the fact that just because we're all in church together, we're all reading the Bible together, we're all doing all these Christian things together, does not necessarily mean that everybody that we are with are true, genuine followers of Christ. And it will be revealed, in the last day. It's not to say that they were truly of us and they were true disciples and at some point they lost. No, they were just never, genuine disciples, to begin with, because I'm not yet seeing, of course, we still have a lot of scriptures to go, but I'm not yet seeing anything that might suggest that, they were true, then they fell off at some point. Now, when we come back, so we're going to pause again, but when we come back, we're going to look at some stuff in the Old Testament. I think that just further solidifies, this point about people who are among, because that's what we're talking about, once saved, always saved. But what does saved actually mean? Because saved does not mean in church. Saved does not mean in choir. Saved does not mean reading the Bible and making, no. Saved is something that is within the heart that God knows. And once you are truly saved, you will endure, to the very end, and God will, will keep you. Then after that, hopefully in that same video, we'll be able to do the conclusion, I suppose, of the piece for the verses and the passages and the thoughts that go for once saved, always saved. Then after that, we will then look at the verses that are against. As I promised, we are going to look at those verses in Revelation, in Hebrews, and in Romans, and see how we can interpret them based on the stuff that we have now. So I'll see you in the next video.